Thank you for joining us. I'm Mia Gradney. Tonight we are celebrating the life and legacy of Barbara Bush, the matriarch of a political dynasty. She was beloved as America's grandmother and has a special place in Houstonians' hearts. Barbara Bush, a mother to one president and wife to another, liked to think of herself as America's grandmother.
And speaking of glamour, I want you all to look at me very carefully. Please notice the hair, the makeup, designer clothes.
The former First Lady's political roots ran deep. She was born in New York City in 1925 and a distant cousin to President Franklin Pierce. And at the age of 16, she met a young Navy pilot at a Christmas dance who swept her off her feet.
You know, I've loved George Bush almost since the day I laid eyes on him.
The couple later married, had 6 children. The oldest she named George W.
That's Mom. She's always been there for us. Her philosophy, simple. Family comes first.
But for a family like the Bushes,
You did vote yesterday? Terrific news.
politics was always there. She campaigned over the years to make sure her family came in first at the polls. She was often the star on the campaign trail. People felt comfortable with her. She was approachable, and she could hold her own. From a campaign in Texas Valley to late night in New York.
You can punch me. No, please don't. Please don't. Please don't.
I wouldn't. Your hands are cold.
But Barbara Bush really enjoyed meeting children, none perhaps more than those battling cancer, which reminded her of a personal agony, the loss of her daughter Robin.
George and I lost a little girl to leukemia more than 30 years ago.
When the Bushes left the White House to make way for a new administration, politics followed them to Texas.
I am so proud of the way our son has run. I really am.
George W. ran for governor, and the family was back on the national scene when he ran for the presidency. Barbara used to tell children they could do anything they wanted. She did it with her own family, however and whenever they wanted to fly.
Attaboy!
After settling back in Houston, she would frequently be seen with her husband at the golf course. She would still make an appearance, like at a bridge dedication for an old friend.
I'm speaking for George, which is more fun these days.
Look at your shoes.
You like my shoes?
And sometimes
What size?
These are a 17 and a half.
she would make new friends
These
My
are
feet
9 and a
shrunk.
half.
They said when you get older, you start to shrink.
I've shrunk
in the most unlikely places.
petite for the first time in my life.
No, Barbara Bush was bigger than life, a first lady, a family matriarch, and beloved by a nation. Mrs. Bush led an incredible life, and we will be sharing stories from friends and family. But first, let's talk about her signature cause, literacy. Jason Miles with how this plain-spoken woman understood the power of words and being able to read them.
Though her life has faded, these vibrant portraits of Barbara Bush are a testament to her vitality and the cause that will continue to thrive in her name.
She recognized that reading can be transformational, and that if more people read, write, and comprehend, that a lot of our world's problems would be solved.
Known as the First Lady of Literacy, Ms. Bush helped pass the National Literacy Act in 1991. A foundation she formed 2 years earlier has generated more than $50 million for the cause. And 5 years ago, Neil and Maria Bush began the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation to specifically benefit the Bush's hometown.
You know, far too many children, about 60% of children enter kindergarten lacking requisite pre-literacy skills.
Foundation President Julie Baker Fink says Ms. Bush took a keen interest in the organization and happily volunteered her own time.
We were setting forth to break the Guinness World Record for the number of children read to within a 24-hour period, and Mrs. Bush said, I want to help, I want to be a reader.
Fink's office is filled with photos of her and the former First Lady, from whom she continues to draw endless inspiration.
You know, we have been working very hard to carry forth her legacy and realize her vision of empowering more people to learn how to read.
Ms. Bush may have put it best herself by simply stating, quote, if you help a person to read, then their opportunities in life will be endless. Standing for Houston, Jason Miles, KHOU 11 News.
Mrs. Bush's passion for family literacy began back in the 1980s and even included a guest appearance that reached a generation of young people.
This is my friend, Mrs. Bush.
Hello, nice to see you again, Big Bird.
Oh, it's nice to see you too. Mrs. Bush is here today to read us a storybook I borrowed from the Sesame Street Library.
Now we want to take you not to a library to borrow a book, but a barber shop. Here's Larry Seward with an unusual place for Barbara Bush's legacy to live on.
Between clips, cuts, and fades.
What book did you choose?
Hygienics barbershop owner Quentin Richardson is all about
talking, man. I like running my mouth. Can't you tell, man? Hey, when I get in here, I go. And sometimes, man, in my talking, I don't know what type of impact I'm having.
He is one of 17 Houston barbers grooming kids for literacy. Their shops, handpicked by Houston Public Libraries, and the health department's My Brother's Keeper program offers little free collections of 50 books that kids can read here or take home. The goal, get more minority children, especially those in poverty, books to read. Every page donated by the Barbara Bush Literacy Foundation.
Literacy is the cornerstone for all aspects, health, wellness, financial aspects.
We've done a lot to curtail any literacy gaps that may exist.
Aziza Mims says her 13-year-old son, Carnegie, went from reading below grade level to tackling books for high school seniors.
I don't see how, because the books are kind of easy to read to me.
They also come recommended from the barber, often privy to things kids won't tell mom. But thanks to the Bush Foundation, they call this the place to be.
When we come back, friends, neighbors, and family remember Houston's first lady, Barbara Bush.
What you saw of Barbara Bush in public was really what you saw of her in person. She was such a straight shooter.
She was our first teacher, and all the mistakes that I've made in my life, they're my own doing, because I had a mom and a dad who taught us right from wrong.
To the Bush family, thank you for sharing your remarkable wife, mother, Grammy Gams with the world.
Barbara Bush is beloved in Houston. It seems everyone has a story about her. Janelle Bluta talked with one man who got a priceless presidential keepsake thanks to, you guessed it, Mrs. Bush.
She was a situational leader.
For Anthony Pizzatola, it's a memory as unforgettable as the woman it's about.
Houston has really lost someone who was a huge advocate for the city.
It was 1987, 2 years before former President George H.W. even got his title. And today, it's hard for Anthony to remember what the reception was even for. But he remembers what happened.
Saw Vice President Bush among a bunch of people talking, and I did not want to disturb him for an autograph.
But he had brought with him his book and his hopes that somehow, some way, he might get one.
I saw Mrs. Bush walking, and I said, Mrs. Bush, may I please have an autograph?
To which the First Lady said yes, and then some.
And she said, you need to go get George. I said, ma'am, he's with a group of people, and I don't want to bother him. And she said, nonsense. She took me by the hand, walked me across a dance floor, and said, George, this is Anthony, and he wants your autograph.
And of course, the vice president listened to his lady.
I listened to her.
And left Anthony with a hand-signed biography of his life, giving him a priceless keepsake and a precious reminder of the woman.
True to the core.
Who had such an impact on every life she ever touched.
This is evidence of someone who can give back, but they did it in order to serve.
Something we've always heard about President and Mrs. Bush is just how down-to-earth they've always been. You could see them out and about all around the city. It was their love, though, of a little pizza parlor in West Houston that changed the life of a Syrian refugee. Our Matt Doherty has the story from Fuzzy's Pizza.
This is the Barbara Bush pizza. It made it on the menu about 20 years ago.
That's her favorite.
Artichoke, spinach, chicken, and garlic. When the couple picked Fuzzy's as their favorite pizza joint 25 years ago, it changed the business. The pizza place continued to expand, and George and Barbara brought friends and dignitaries to dine. Fuzzy, who's originally from Syria, says the Bushes saw in him the embodiment of the American dream, and they became lifelong friends.
She stood up for her family. She stood up for, America, and I'd say a real true First Lady.
Me and my wife, when we heard it, she was sick and we were so upset. I couldn't sleep at night. But today, it's even worse, when we hear the news.
You know what they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Lauren Tallarico spoke to Houston photographer Mike Marvins to hear the story behind a great portrait he took of the Bushes and their dog.
Whenever I walk down the hall, I'll pick out one or something and look at it.
Adorning the walls of Mike Marvin's home is an eclectic collection of famous photographs.
This is the photograph that defined the Dust Bowl.
He enjoys
the stories behind the pictures.
As a fourth-generation photographer, he has some pretty neat stories of his own, like the one behind this photograph he took of the Bushes in 1995.
The Bushes had come back to Houston after his presidency was over.
As the honoree for Citizens for Animal Protection, the Bushes and their dog were sitting for a portrait. Mike was giving direction.
We got to move this chair over the other side of it. It's one of these big, heavy, upholstered chairs. So the Secret Service guys came in, and they're bending down, and she sort of scolded them. You've just had back problems. And she says, Mike, come on, pick it up. We can do this ourselves.
Once she moved the heavy chair, there was another hurdle. Millie just wouldn't look up.
I had a technique to get Doggie's attention, which is barking. Millie looks up like, what in the heck's going on here? And the bush is totally cracked up. And that's what the picture is.
A picture that captures more than an image, but a memory.
Mrs. Bush's love for literacy reminds us all that words matter. And as the city celebrates the former First Lady, a look at how Houston is finding just the right tribute.
She was just absolutely awesome.
Sunshine with just enough wind to keep you on your toes. It's forecast fitting of a former First Lady.
First Lady Barbara Bush was a phenomenal woman.
It's just the right tribute.
You will truly be missed. Rest in peace.
Your memory will forever live with us.
You are beautiful.
To the Bush family,
I love you.
Thank you for sharing your remarkable wife, mother, Grammy, Gams with the world.
My most memorable event is when I sat a couple of rows behind you at the rodeo. Your youngest son was being recognized, and like any mother, you were proud and took several pictures with your iPad. It reminds me that no matter what title we hold, a mom is always a proud mom of our children.
Reading about her, watching her, listening to her interviews, and just witnessing how she conducted herself as a human being, I think she was a gift to humanity.
And now, a gift to Houston. These messages,
go Astros, go Texans, go Bush family,
will be part of the public library's historical archives. The memories.
She was thoughtful. She was kind.
Celebrate Houston royalty.
Her elegance and agility were in a class of their own, with kindness, love, and oneness. May her soul rest in eternal peace. We love and miss you.
The thing our video couldn't capture is just how cathartic that process was. So many people took a breath or welled up in tears after they wrote a message to the former First Lady.
Barbara Bush was the strongest of leaders who led our country and the Bush family with grace and quick wit.
Still to come, the family remembers their matriarch.
Mom, I just want you to know you've been a fabulous mother, and I love you dearly.
And later, we'll look back at a great love story.
I don't think there is a George Bush without a Barbara Bush.
Barbara Bush always stressed the importance of family, and this week her husband, children, and grandchildren shared with the world how important she was to them and some of their family stories.
I said, Mom, I just want you to know you've been a fabulous mother, and I love you dearly. And she said, I want you to know that you're my favorite son on the phone.
That, her loved ones say, was Barbara Bush, always loving but feisty.
Barbara Bush was the strongest of leaders who led our country and the Bush family with grace and quick wit.
She was a leader who seemed to rise above politics.
They come up to you and they go, I love your mother. And that was always code for, I'm a Democrat, I can't stand you, your brother, your dad. But I love your mother.
Even more than for the public, Mrs. Bush was an icon for her children and grandchildren, including Pierce Bush.
What you saw of Barbara Bush in public was really what you saw of her in person. She was such a straight shooter.
The family's focus is now on their patriarch, H.W., left without his wife of 73 years.
He held my mom's hand all day long yesterday, and she passed in the early evening. And I called him, and he said, I'm kind of a crybaby right now.
You know, this is his partner of 73 years. Someone who, you know, I don't think there is a George Bush without a Barbara Bush.
But despite the loss of the love of his life, President Bush seems to be trying to make his wife proud, continuing on and comforting others who showed up to share their respects for a great lady. Their lives were intertwined. You can't talk about one without the other. When we come back, the love story of George and Barbara Bush. George and Barbara Bush were married 73 years, longer than any other couple in presidential history. Kevin Reese with their life together.
It's a love story nearing its 8th decade, a love story found in letters from World War II and still on display on a kiss cam at a Texans football game in Houston. They were two young kids in 1941. He was 17, she was 16 when they met at a school dance. A year and a half later, they were engaged. He was on his way to becoming the youngest pilot in the Navy. Their long-distance relationship revealed in letters. She called him Poppy. He called her Bar. I love you, precious, with all my heart, he wrote. And to know that you love me means my life. How often I've thought about the immeasurable joy that will be ours someday. But of the war, he said, it is frightening at times. The seriousness of this is beginning to strike home. And to Poppy, she wrote back, I really am excited but scared to death too. If you hear a big noise up there, don't worry. It's just my knees knocking. But it's a love story that nearly ended before it had a chance to start. A year later, he was shot down near the Japanese island of Chichijima. He was rescued by a passing submarine, but his two crewmen died. And the rest of the letters he carried from Bar were lost at sea too. They married in 1945. They had 6 children, including a future president and a little girl named Robin who died of leukemia at the age of 4. There would be dozens of different homes as Mr. Bush chased their fortunes in the Texas oil business, then the political career that took him from Congress to the UN to the CIA and to the White House, where the love story obviously endured.
I've loved George Bush almost since the day I laid eyes on him.
There have been health scares of late, even time spent being treated in the same Houston hospital together. But back in 2009, Mrs. Bush needed a new heart valve. The operation was a success, but it was a husband's heart that was open and on display.
And it went so well, and I've been a nervous wreck about it. I think there's a lot of interest because of who she is.
Back in that letter from 1943, Mr. Bush wrote to his fiancée, Bar, you have made my life full of everything I could ever dream of.
What a love story. What a life. Barbara Bush made a difference. She made a mark and made the world a better place for all of us. Good night, and thank you for joining us to celebrate the life and legacy of Houston's First Lady.